All right, we're going to go over the Parsha from Mattot Maasei, which was last week and ended on Shabbat. This is a double portion, two Parshas together, and it's the longest two Parshas together. So each Aliyah is very long in terms of length of verses. And there's a lot I want to say, but we'll try to keep each video quick and to the point. And let's go. So the first Aliyah is from Numbers chapter 30, verse 2. Moses spoke to the heads of the tribes of the children of Israel, saying, "This is the thing that the Lord had commanded." Now, Mattot is translated as, it says Rosh HaMattot. Mattot is a staff. So what does a staff do? A staff helps you stand up, helps you keep upright. It keeps you standing. It like supports you. So the heads of the tribes are like the supporters of the whole tribe. And there's a lot to say about what it means to be a matot in general. Like it's actually describing the person himself, that they themselves were kind of like a staff, like a staff. Now, so this is the thing that the Lord had commanded. If a man makes a vow to the Lord or makes an oath to prohibit himself, he shall not violate his word. According to whatever came out of his mouth, he shall do. So again, like when you stand by your word, when you take a stand by your word, it's like you're supporting your words, you're standing by it. That's like what a staff does. A staff keeps you upright, keeps you standing, and that's like your words. You should stand by your words. So this is kind of a nice connection between the two verses. So when I would say God's name, when I make a vow using God's name, I'm standing behind my words. If a woman makes a vow to the Lord or imposes a prohibition upon herself while in her father's house in her youth, so this is a very specific time period. So I think this is before she becomes bat mitzvah. So it's like, and apparently girls got married off very young back then. I mean, we don't do this anymore, but I think I read or heard somebody say to me, this is like a 6-month time period that this verse holds up. So if a woman makes a vow to the Lord or imposes a prohibition, now it has to be a prohibition, upon herself in her father's house in her youth, if her father heard her vow or her prohibition, which she had prohibited upon herself, yet her father remains silent, all her vows shall stand, and any prohibition that she has imposed upon herself shall stand. So I don't know what prohibition she's going to put upon herself. I don't know, like, okay, so because there's a lot of things that we're already not supposed to do. So why would anybody put more restrictions upon themselves? But I don't know, let's use an example like maybe Shabbat. So Shabbat gets out as Shlosh Chochavim, and so she said, you know what, I'm not going to take out Shabbat for another hour because there is like room in the Talmud to take out Shabbat later. Maybe that's what it means. Or does it mean like a prohibition, like she already keeps kosher, but she doesn't want to eat meat, the kosher meat. She only wants to eat vegetables, be a vegetarian. Is that what you're talking? Is that the prohibition I'm talking about? Like, what prohibitions are we talking about? Because women and men in general are already prohibited from so many things. There's a lot of thou shalt not do. So what more can it possibly? What are we talking about here? Now, if her father heard her vow or a prohibition which she had prohibited upon herself, yet her father remains silent, all her vows shall stand, and any prohibition that she imposed upon herself shall stand. Okay, I already said that. But if her father hinders her on the day he hears it, meaning he heard it on that day, and all her vows and her prohibitions that she imposed upon herself shall not stand. So it doesn't matter how many prohibitions she put upon herself. If her father says, no, I don't accept, they're nullified. This is a power that the father has over his daughter for a very limited time period, which I won't, the verses don't go into. The Lord will forgive her because of her father had hindered her. So that means if she did it and she didn't know that her father had let her up, so let's say she prohibited herself against something, and her father said, no, I'm not accepting that, but she didn't know that, so she did that thing anyway. She prohibited herself, and she went basically against her father's words. It's okay, like the Lord's going to forgive her because she didn't know that her father had not accepted her vows. I think that's what happens. If her husband, so now we're moving out of her father's house. So if her husband hears it, but remains silent on the day he hears it, her vow shall stand, and her prohibition which she has imposed upon herself shall stand. Now this is when a woman is even when she's engaged, because back in, used to be that engagement was a year before marriage. Now we don't do that anymore. We haven't done that for maybe several hundreds of years, where we have the engagement, the nisuim, we do the engagement, the betrothal on the same day, the same night as the person gets married. So there isn't really this time lapse like there used to be, where a woman was engaged to somebody. She for at least a year. That was something that was very common up until maybe about 500-600 years ago. But if a woman, if her husband, again, this is also meaning if a guy is just engaged to a woman, here's on the day he heard it, and he has revoked the vow she has taken upon herself, and the utterance which she has imposed upon herself, and the Lord will forgive her. So the guy who's engaged, he has this authority, he has the ability to override her vows if he hears them and he doesn't agree with them. As for the vow of the widow or the divorced woman, whatever she prohibited upon herself will remain upon her. So once a woman has been married and gets divorced, or if a woman is a widow, she doesn't have to. She's her own person, and she doesn't need, or a guy can't do this. There's no like more of this situation where another person can nullify her vows or not. Now, what if a woman never got married? So that doesn't bring up that case. But if she vowed in her husband's house or imposed a prohibition upon himself with an oath, and her husband heard and remained silent and did not hinder her, all her vows shall stand, and every prohibition she imposed upon herself shall stand. If her husband revokes them on the day he hears them, any issuing from her lips regarding her vows or self-imposed prohibitions shall not stand. Her husband has revoked them, and the Lord shall forgive her. Any vow or binding oath of self-affliction her husband can either uphold or revoke it. So he could agree with the vow, he could agree with it, or he could nullify it. However, if her husband remains silent from the day to day, meaning from the time he heard it until the nighttime comes, he has upheld all the vows and prohibitions she has assumed. He has upheld them since he remained silent on the day he heard it. If he revokes them after hearing them, he shall bear her inequity. These are the statutes which the Lord commanded Moses concerning a man and his wife, a father and his daughter in her youth while in his father's house. So here they're called hokim. A hok is something that is a super rational law, meaning this whole thing that we just read, all these things about prohibitions, about laws, about the vows, about making an oath. These are something that are not rational. These are something that goes beyond reason. So if you're trying to look for the reasons behind this, the Torah is telling you it's not something that's within the human logic. It has its own internal religious logic. So and we do stand by this is something inside the Torah, and it's written maforish. And the rabbis, of course, come along and explain each one of these verses. And there's whole sections in the Mishnah and the Talmud about making vows. This is something taken very, very seriously because we're saying God's name, and we don't want to say God's name in vain. So we can act. So people used to be very afraid of this. Mafachad used to be really scared of breaking their vows. Now, maybe so much, not so much anymore. People are much more casual about it. And actually, we have this whole thing where we say bli neder. We try not to make vows anymore. The Lord spoke to Moses saying, so this is verse 1 from chapter 31. The Lord spoke to Moses saying, take revenge of the children of Israel against the Midianites. Afterwards you shall be gathered to your people. So this is the last thing that God's going to make Moses do before Moses dies. It's really, really hard because he was married into the Midianite people. His wife was actually from the Midianite people. Now he has to go and attack them and fight a war with them. Now this is a war that has nothing to do with conquesting any land, which the commentators are going to take note of. And this is a very harsh and harif war, and it doesn't sit well with a reader of the 21st century, but we're going to read the verses anyways. So Moses spoke to the people saying, arm among your men of the army that can be against Midianite, and carry out the revenge of the Lord against Midian. 1,000 for each tribe, 1,000 for each tribe, all the tribes of Israel you shall send into the army. This includes the Levites. The Levites also went to this war. From the thousands of Israel, 1,000 was given over for each tribe, 12,000 armed for battle. Moses sent the 1,000 from each tribe to the army. Among was Pinchas, the son of Eleazar the Cohen, to the army, with the sacred utensils and the trumpets for sounding in his possession. They mounted an attack against Midian, and as the Lord had commanded, and they killed every male. They killed the Midianite kings upon their slain, Avi, Rechem, Zur, Hur, and Reba, the 5 kings of Midian, and Balaam, the son of Beor, who they slew with the sword. So you remember the story from Balak, Parsha Balak? There was this guy named Bilam who tried to curse us all. So at the end of that Parsha, they sent the Midianite women, and there was a whole plague, and there was this big sex fest that was going on in the middle of the desert, and 24,000 of our people died in that. So this is why we're fighting the war against the Midianites for that whole situation over there. The children took the Midianite women and their small children captive, and they plundered all their beasts, livestock, and their possession. They set fire to all the residential cities, and their castles. They took all the booty and the plunder of the man and the beast. They brought all the captives of plunder and the booty to Moses and Eleazar the Cohen, and the entire community of Israel in the camp in the plains of Moab by the Jordan at Jericho. Woo! So this is really intense. We burned their cities to the ground, and we killed all their men, and we took their women and their children. And this ends the first Aliyah of this Parsha.